Survivors in the Frozen North. Please turn to page 2. Chapter 1. 3 months old. Far away, in the north of the world, Kamet, the polar bear cub, poked his nose out of a tunnel in the snow. The tunnel led to the cramped winter den where he had been born 3 months ago. Now, for the first time in his life, Kamet felt the sun on his face and the wind in his fur. His twin sister, Sharni, pushed him from behind. The 2 cubs skidded down the slope towards their mother, Talik. She had clawed her way out of the den a few minutes earlier. For a while, the cubs enjoyed tumbling about in the snow. But soon they were tired out, and their mother led them back to the shelter of the den where she suckled them. Talik was very thin. She had eaten nothing for 5 whole months. If she did not find food soon, all 3 of them would die. A day or 2 later, Talik decided that her cubs were strong enough to walk to the frozen sea. There she would hunt for seals. But Kamet and Sharni had short legs, and it was difficult for them to cross the icy ridges. Although Talik was starving, she had to keep stopping to let her tired cubs feed and rest. Her body sheltered them from the freezing wind. After walking for several days, Talik stopped and lifted her nose in the air. She could smell seals. At last, she had reached the hunting grounds. Talik soon made her first kill. Now she would not starve to death, and she would be able to go on feeding her cubs. Down by the frozen sea, Kamet and Sharni were well fed, but the world was still full of danger. One day, as they walked along, Talik saw a large male bear approaching. She knew that he might try to attack her cubs and eat them. Talik was smaller than the male bear, but she growled so fiercely that he decided not to risk a fight. He turned back and left the cubs alone. This time the twins had survived, but Talik was still nervous. She took no chances and hurried them away. Chapter 2. 6 months old. 3 months later, the cubs were still too small to hunt for their own food. Every day they followed Talik and learned her skills. Sometimes she would sit beside a seal's breathing hole, waiting for the seal to come back from catching fish beneath the ice. When the seal put its head above the water to take a breath, Talik would swipe at it with her huge paw. But the seals were quick and wary and would often escape. Then she would have to try again. Kamet and Sharni loved to have play fights. Once, as Talik was waiting silently by a breathing hole, the cubs scuffled with each other. The seal heard them, saw their moving shadows, and was scared away. Talik was cross, and she turned round and cuffed Kamet and Sharni with her large paw. After that lesson, the cubs knew that they must keep quiet and still while their mother was hunting. Late in the summer, the thick sea ice began to melt. One day, Talik crossed some open water between floating islands of ice. Kamet and Sharni, whose paws were smaller, paddled along slowly behind her. They were enjoying their first real swim. But not for long. A pod of fierce killer whales saw them and gave chase. Talik knew that she had to reach the safety of a large ice floe, but she couldn't leave her cubs behind. In a great hurry, she got Kamet to climb onto her back. Then, with Sharni clinging to her fur, Talik swam for her life. Talik and her cubs scrambled out of the water just in time. Then they raced away from the edge of the ice, well out of reach of the leaping whales. Talik had saved her cubs from terrible danger once again. Chapter 3. 2 years old. Talik took care of her cubs for more than 2 years. During all that time, she fed them and sheltered them and protected them from danger. Kamet and Sharni grew to be nearly as big as their mother, but they did not want to leave her. They knew that she would allow them to share all the food that she caught. But one morning, Talik left her cubs because she knew that they were big enough to hunt for their own food. She had taught them well, and all that they needed was practice. At first the cubs wandered about, expecting Talik to come back, but a day later she still had not returned. The twins were now on their own. They felt lonely and hungry. As the weeks went by, they grew even hungrier. A dead seabird was the only thing they found to eat. They tried to catch seals at their breathing holes, but the seals were too quick for them. Talik had shown her cubs how to hunt, but they were finding it very difficult. They were getting desperate. Kamet and Sharni could not survive much longer without food. At last, Kamet saw a seal resting on the ice with its back to the water. Now he had a chance. He would sneak up behind it. Kamet lowered himself into the sea without making a noisy splash. With great care, he swam towards the seal until he was very close to it. He sprang out of the water and killed the seal before it had time to escape. Sharni hurried to join Kamet, and together they shared a good meal for the first time since their mother had left. And a few days later, all by herself, Sharni managed to catch a seal at its breathing hole. She shared it with her brother. Kamet and Sharni had finally learned to take care of themselves. Now they could survive alone in the dangerous frozen world.